My name is Jerry A. I was stationed at FOB, Forward Operating Base, Patriot, in Mosul, Iraq. Before I entered the military, even afterwards, during late nights or breaks with some superstitious buddies of mine, I'd always hear snippets of horror stories about Afghanistan military bases being haunted. After all the bloodshed that had happened over the years, they said the dead still haunts the area around the bases, taking on the form of terrifying demonic beings, scaring soldiers for decades. They never scared me, never thought they would, at least until now. But this time it wasn't just some story being told to me. It happened to me. I was out patrolling the base. I could see the sun was setting over the horizon and the chilling night air started to settle in. It was getting darker by the minute. A little while later, I got a call over the radio saying that the airbase, FOB Diamondback, was under attack. Personnel had spotted a violent-looking group of people charging the base full force with seemingly no guns or weapons on them. Every other FOB got word of it as well, and we all went straight to the airbase to help defend. An engineer, a PSYOPs guy, and I all hopped into a truck with a few other infantry soldiers and sped over to the airbase. We met with 4 other trucks from other bases as well. Me, the engineer and PSYOPs guy hopped into a ditch, took cover and aimed our guns at the figures. It was too dark to see any faces, only their tall figures sprinting towards the base, scaling up the walls. Eventually the other soldiers opened fire on them, and as did we. All the figures fell to the ground, but one figure caught our eye. One of us had shot him, and he'd fell to the ground. Right after he fell, it looked like there was a stream of black smoke coming out of him. The engineer made a comment saying that the guy must have been wearing a suicide vest and the black smoke was it malfunctioning. A few seconds later though, the black smoke grew larger and started to take a human-looking form. What happened next all 3 of us saw, and there was no doubt. The now fully materialised black smoke was standing upright and had red, smoky, glowing eyes and a weird-looking mouth. The damn thing smiled at us and sort of turned and run. But it just dissipated after it took a few steps. We stared at each other in disbelief. What the hell just happened? We all agreed to never speak that moment again after that. Maybe there was some truth to all those stories. The dead forever haunting the grounds there, relentlessly torturing the living soldiers that they think were the ones who killed them. I occasionally think back to that moment, wondering who that man could have been. Or maybe it wasn't a man. Simply an evil spirit manifested from the anger and hate of thousands of people killed on those grounds. When I was a Marine, I used to have the graveyard patrol shift at the Beirut Memorial at Camp Lejeune. Most people would never take this position, for an obvious reason. But I never got freaked out when I was alone in a remote cemetery in the middle of the night, completely surrounded by dense woods for some damn reason. My buddies thought I was crazy, although I was just strong-minded to not lose it out there on those cold, wet nights, silently patrolling a cemetery alone. Maybe I actually was crazy, after hearing horror story after horror story when I was younger. Even now, when I'm older, I still accepted that position. Although my sense of fear quickly came back to me when one night I was patrolling near the perimeter fence, which is where some of the oldest headstones are, and I heard the sound of a woman humming. I, now thinking about it in hindsight, for some reason followed the sound of the humming. I hiked through the wet foliage and kept following the strangely soothing humming. I reached a point where I saw a light glowing brightly through the vines and leaves of a large tree. It looked like something straight out of a fairy tale. When I was approaching the tree, I could literally feel my hair standing on end, as if there was an electric current in the air. I started to push aside the vines and foliage, and what I saw almost took my breath away. There was a small clearing that the large tree had been hiding. In the middle of the clearing stood an old, weathered headstone made of marble, with a large cross engraved near the top. The cross glowed a bright, vivid blue, which kind of looked like a neon light bulb to me. The headstone shone and sparkled in the moonlight, as if I had just found some hidden great treasure. I could hear the woman's humming suddenly growing much louder, and it strangely sounded like 100 other voices had joined in with her, making it echo through the woods with such a pure tone. A melodic tune filled the small clearing, shaking the leaves and blowing through the wind, as if the music was meant to beckon me inside the clearing. After a while of staring in awe at this beautiful headstone, I pulled the leaves back in place, turned my back on the small clearing and took a deep breath. Basically, after a few minutes of standing in place and saying nothing at all, I freaked out. I screamed so loud I could hear it echo. Screaming my head off like a little girl helped me out a lot since it started to drown out the terrifying humming. I sprinted straight through the woods cemetery and then right back to the parking lot as fast as I could. Needless to say, I didn't take that graveyard shift for a while again after that. I dreaded the feeling of being watched. Even as a kid, I'd always hear horror stories of something totally innocent, like, say, a doll or some harmless stuffed animal for kids. They'd always be possessed, or they'd turn out to be some tool the evil villain used to spy on the protagonist. As I got older, my fear of simple children's toys got so bad I couldn't be near any of the stuffed animals my mother bought me, or else I'd start bawling my eyes out, fearing that one day one of them would simply get up and start walking around my room to try and kill me. Anyways, with that little backstory over with, let's move on to the main story I'm trying to tell here. When I was in the military, I was an infantry. I know, tiring position to be in 24/7. But I was starting to get used to being outside in the fields and out on missions for multiple weeks. I remember when I was digging out a place to sleep for the night, it felt like I had hit a decently sized rock. I pushed aside the dirt and it looked something like a small golem head sticking out of the ground. I wasn't really freaked out at first, since it was around 1 AM and I was really tired. So I tugged it out of the ground and threw it elsewhere, thinking nothing of it. After a while, I got snuggled up in my little trench and got into a fighting position. 10 minutes later, I fell asleep. Then maybe an hour later, I woke up feeling of something tugging at my foot. At first, I assumed it was a rat or a small animal. Then I sleepily opened my eyes. It was dark as hell, so I could barely see, but I made out the small figure that sort of looked like that small golem I threw away earlier. It looked like it was grabbing my boot, as if it was trying to pull me down into the dirt. It had been a few days of me being out there in the field, so naturally I was tired as hell. I simply chalked it up to me hallucinating. I ignored it, closed my eyes and went back to sleep. I woke up around 7 AM. The golem that I thought I saw pulling on my boot was gone. Maybe I was hallucinating. Although that's what I'd been telling myself until a few days after that. Me and another infantry soldier were on a watch, just chatting away the day. Suddenly he yelled, "What the hell is that?" He pointed to a large stone wall not far from the area we were keeping watch. Our drill sergeant came next to us with a pair of binoculars, looked at the stone wall and mumbled under his breath, "What the hell?" I took my own pair of binoculars and looked out to the wall myself, and what I saw made my heart drop. It was the small stone golem, crawling atop the wall back and forth. Suddenly it stood upright, looked towards our direction and raised its arm, as if it was waving at us.